The Federal and Velevin Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and St. Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal's special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. We are privileged to have celebrated author M.G. Vassanji with us, and we are going to talk about his latest and I believe his 10th novel, and that is Everything There Is, that has been published by Context. And it is a beautiful story of a genius, of love, of desire, of this coexistence of physics and religion in a way, and most of all, it's inspired from the story of Abdus Salam, the nuclear physicist of Pakistan, the celebrated nuclear physicist of Pakistan, who was the first Muslim and the first Pakistani to win the Nobel Prize for physics. And it is such a travesty, Mr. Vassanji. First of all, welcome to the show.
Right,
thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. Let us begin with the book. It of course resurrects Abdus Salam's life, and you have a character who is called Nurul Islam, right? And he's a physicist, much like Abdus Salam himself. A lot of it has resonances from his life, but at the same time you would say that it's completely it stands as a work of fiction, and you have taken liberties here and there. For instance, the theory that he sort of worked on, and that was building on the Higgs boson or the God particle theory, and to establish the connection of unifying those fundamental forces.
Yeah. So what I have done is take a few fixed points from the real person's life. Right. But everything between, even the connections, are fictitious. Right. I don't even know, even to this day, how many children he had. Because for the story, it was irrelevant.
Right.
I gave him 2 sons and a daughter, and I built a story around that. So it is a novel, but it's inspired by Abdus Salam, who in fact was born and raised in pre-partition India. So people forget that, and his town happened to be a few miles inside the border, and as I point out in the book, if Mr. I forget his name had drawn the border differently, things would have been different. But in any case, it is fiction, but it is inspired by a real prodigy, a genius.
Right.
And in my book, several threads in his life I've dramatized to reach a certain conclusion.
So what was the specific moment when it struck you that it is the right material for your book, and you are always somebody who has drawn on your own heritage, as someone born to Indian parents in Kenya, raised in Tanzania, and then of course the life that you built in Canada, in Toronto. And I wanted to understand that specific moment when you realized that.
The moment was, I think, in about 2015, a long time ago,
right.
Sort of. We had some guests, a few from India, 3 of them from India, but 2 living in New York, and a couple of other people. And there's something that had been niggling at my mind, was that how can a person who is working at the most abstract level of science or physics, where the belief is a kind of an arrogant belief, but physicists, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, did believe that if they understood the forces of nature, then everything would be explained. If you know how an atom is put together, how then molecules are put together, then basically you build on that. So with that mental state all around him, how did this guy, brought up as a Muslim, but to go down to pray, it intrigued me. What kind of a person would that be? How is it possible, in fact? Because I was never like that, So that's what I just fictionalized, that character and that trait, I gave him a little bit of a contradictions, which I think popular imagination doesn't believe in, because I'm sure he had some doubts, like most of us, and he violated a few laws, you know. But so it was in a way a difficult book, but also a fun book, you know.
Right, right. But I mean, for a lot of readers, it would be the very thought that perhaps it's all about nuclear physics and those nuances of science. It would be intimidating. But reading the book, you do not get that sense. It's a page turner. It just keeps you. It's a gripping read. Let me ask you about this fact that, of course, you mentioned about the contradiction, and he was a devout Muslim who was also sort of a renowned scientist. And this element of betrayal that happened, and that's the most tragic element of his story, that here is someone who has done a lot for his country, lauded, by all other countries abroad except for his own. And I was reading a few accounts of how Zulfikar Ali Bhutto or General Zia himself later, when Ahmadiyyas were, there was a law passed by the Pakistan government saying that the Ahmadiyyas are, non-Muslims and they're heretics and they should be seen as, So that whole thing that started with, I think 1974 onwards, and then
around about that time, yeah.
Yeah. So this betrayal from a country that sort of abandoned its own genius, and in a way, and continues to do that, as we have seen in the instances of the desecration of his grave.
He was. It has to be understood. He did. I think he was head of the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission or something. So he did some work, as you would say,
advisor
for the
Pakistan
nation
government.
that he happened to somehow land in. But as a physicist, you don't work for a country. You work for physics.
Right.
You work because to solve a puzzle, to explain the universe. Putting a flag on your theory. So the two are different. But because of that, he was then idolized by young people, including Ayub Khan.
Yes.
And by people and other scientists. For me, it was Dirac, for example, or Heisenberg. It doesn't matter which country they came from. They were as I said, the gods. And Nurul Islam, when she says that in an interview, then the fundamentalists go after her.
So this whole way that sort of history and memory keeps shaping up your persona, and that's a recurring theme, I think, in most of your novels.
Yes.
But for this particular one, how did you work on it?
It's hard to say, but I think the partition, even though I did not experience it, I was away. It also happened before my time.
Right.
But to discover it after coming to India and to realize that there is this border, and yet you're supposed to put it across your heart or soul when you didn't even know about it when you were growing up.
Right.
So it has been a very bothersome idea for me.
Yeah.
That the same people could create such mutual hatred. So I suppose this was another way of dealing with it, another novel. So I think it just happened that with Abdus Salam or Nurul Islam in this book, that it is, he was affected, and it sort of, at the end, of course, I don't want to give the conclusion, but it somehow led to the conclusion that's in the book, that it was not just, it was his stand on the nuclear program, which Bhutto, I fictionalized him, was very keen on. He said, we will eat grass, but we will have a bomb. And he says, who will eat grass? Not you.
Right.
And then, of course, Abdus Salam also had a band of detractors, who just consistently, even to this day, unless the guy is dead by now, I don't know, started writing propaganda against him. That, he was a few months after Weinberg, did his theory, or, that he should not be considered for the Nobel Prize. Or there was a group. Now, Abdus Salam, from what I understand, he was an arrogant man. Although I recently met some Indian professor who said I met him in Italy and he was very humble. Maybe he changed.
Yeah.
But at that level of achievement and knowledge, arrogance comes naturally, even without thinking. We don't think to be arrogant. You just are, because you're right
part
there.
of your,
You're right there, You're next to God in a way.
Yeah.
So maybe because of that he had made some enemies, but he also wondered if he had not been brown, he would have been treated the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got a hint of that in a couple of places, but I think he had a personality that sort of washed, and he had not only the personality, he had the achievement
Yeah.
to somehow be able to ignore it.
Yeah.
Because who are these guys? I mean, you can say that,
True. True. There's this account of, when he gets the Nobel, and, Pakistan, of course, is very, its approach is very cautionary in the sense that it does not want to ruffle feathers of the fundamentalists in the country. And General Ziaul Haq, he holds this private ceremony in which he confers the Nishani-Imtiaz on him. And I believe it was Indira Gandhi who had called him up and said that, why don't you bring him here in India and let us celebrate together? And then he said, no, if India can do that, why shouldn't we? And then he held a private ceremony of his own. So the fact that, the rulers of Pakistan, in a way, somewhere deep within, acknowledged his contribution, but they were afraid of the fact that, perhaps if they do it publicly, they will, all hell will break loose, and, the country will. And as it is, it had to happen, because once you make a particular section of your country, and I think this is a strand that we see in India today, not perhaps in that in that concrete sense, but slightly differently, that when you declare a section of your own country as non-believers, and in a state like Pakistan, a theocratic sort of
yes.
in some sense, but then what you end up doing is actually unleash a set of fundamentalists on that section. And that's precisely what happened. And, he was, I think Abdus Salam was, according to some accounts, made to believe that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is going to retract that thing. But that obviously never happened. So it was somewhere he was betrayed. And I'm coming to Betrayal because, this novel is also at the core of it is a betrayal, If you look at the betrayal of his own wife, who was his relative, and it was an arranged marriage, and then there is a love story when he comes to Cambridge and all. Could you talk about these little personal anecdotes that you had to weave through the narrative?
Personally, I've dealt with the similar topic in other novels.
Right.
You see, in the traditional Indian South Asian marriage,
right,
it is by arrangement, but some kind of a mutual agreement is done, not without any rancor or anything.
Yes.
And then the idea of love grows.
Yes.
See, among our people, love comes later, not first. With our parents, and as they grow older, they know, and so. But with modernization, you find that this is now I'm looking at the book, The Delhi Obsession, where the woman somehow realizes that she's never really loved, because she's missed out something. In this case, it was the man, Abdus Salam. He still loves his wife. But there's something in relation. His wife is a very simple woman. Loving, caring. She sort of, keeps the house together. Without her, he might not have succeeded. But there's something that he cannot articulate, but he misses that attraction of the other. And that's what happens. And I think the ultimate act of love in his wife was when she says, I allow you to have a second wife. I think for me that was a revelation. I didn't know I was going to write that. But my brother-in-law was in tears. Because what is love? It's many things, and but I think, and she also had attraction for someone else, a very hidden, impossible attraction. So life at that stage, I think when we are young, we don't realize. We don't think my mother might have maybe felt attraction for someone else. We don't think like that, but obviously it's possible. So I somehow explored that aspect of love in a South Asian family.
And towards the end, I think there's a moving chapter in which she breaks the news, and we are not going to disclose, of course, what it is. But that's again sort of some kind of a testament to the way he sort of invites him over the house and breaks that news, and also the fact that she cooks and makes good food for her and stuff like that. So
yeah, and she always says, "I'm the first."
Right. And another question, Mr. Vassanji, this, of course, there's this element of in some sense redeeming his story, this novel. Do you see that this novel as an attempt to redeem his story, and also to prove that science and religion could coexist, even though it had its own sort of pitfalls?
Well, coexist, of course they have to coexist, because I think we have a need somehow to deal with death, for example. That's the main thing. But in what manner, he could easily have been a more spiritual, a Sufi type of believer. You don't have to go down on your knees, if you can explain the universe, you just give due respect and go for the internal, which is what I was brought up with. It's internal, it's not outside. The fact of belief. But he actually had this, and that part of the book I did a lot of research on, because it was not my tradition. That's why I put that in the back, all the sites. I had heard about those things only after I left to go to university. What the hadith is and what this and that. But he actually was completely steeped in it. Now, of course, we don't know what his doubts would have been like. And this is where a novelist can just take his character anywhere he wants to. But we really don't know, a lot about many people, even ourselves. We just keep discovering, So it's. People should not be surprised or think that it's the real guy. What is that? If you ask yourself, how real are you? It's not there.
You said it was fun writing this novel. Was it easy for you because you also a trained nuclear physicist yourself?
No, the physics part was just a kind of background.
Important
just a scaffolding background. Of some sense. It is a kind of. But the fun part was, the dialogue between husband and wife. Where they.
Right.
When he breaks the news, for example, that or she finds out he wants a second wife, and she swears at him, and he said, "I never heard this from you." These Punjabi epithets. So I had fun with that. I somehow felt confident that I've got the tone right.
Right.
I think it would have been true of any background on the subcontinent. The wife, she's going to say that. Right. So those things were fun, and.
But did it also entail sort of researching a little bit about his own background? You said you do not really have too many sort of real connections.
I read it. There's one biography that I consulted, but I don't remember the number of kids or, and that biography is very factual. It doesn't give you the feelings or thoughts of. I read his essays or lectures.
Okay.
Because one obsession he had was that science, everyone should, it's like physics or mathematics, is a part of human culture. It should be accessible to everyone, which is why he founded the institute in Italy, in Trieste.
Yes.
Where people from different countries can go and experience the thrill of discovering the universe, obviously, So that was his obsession. I think half of his prize money he gave to that institute.
Yeah.
So that, I think I've touched upon it, and also the fact that I don't know if he also thought like that, but the fact that there were some great scientists who were not necessarily Muslims, but they were part of what we call the Islamic world.
Yeah.
From Cordoba all the way to, I don't know, somewhere in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And they were part of it, especially a lot of them in Persia, in Iran. And if you look at it now, when people think you can tap the energy of jinns, to sort of solve the energy crisis, and that kind of mentality in the 20th century, how can that be,
Right.
So I think Parvez Udbo has been fighting this battle,
Right.
as a kind of lone.
Yeah. In India, we had figures like, of course, and there are some connections that Abdus Salam shared with figures like Ramanujan, for instance, or Homi Bhabha, for instance. What
Ramanujan
parallels
was
do you
way
see?
back.
Well, way back in time,
Yeah.
but he sort of inspired from his.
Of course.
Yeah,
I think Abdus Salam, in fact, he solved a problem that Ramanujan had solved, but in a different way, even when he was a student. Baba, from what I understand, was much more pro-nuclear weapon. And he was a few years before Abdus Salam,
Right.
also at Cambridge. There were, of course, in India. Oh, the name I know is just Baba. I know from other Bose and but not in the particle field. And there was Hargobind Khorana.
Yes.
And he was a few miles. His village was a few miles away from
his village. Yeah.
So there was a lot of possibilities,
Yeah.
which have been sort of, I don't know what you call it, but just.
So would you say that? Would you say that his? Sorry, you wanted to finish that.
No. It's just possibilities that never sort of materialized into anything because of the madness of people.
Right. So would you say that his legacy was in some sense tarnished by the fact that on the one hand he had detractors within the community of scientists, and on the other there were these fundamentalist forces. And I remember this Urdu couplet, the Zahide tang nazar ne mujhe kafir jana और काफिर ये समझता है मुसलमान हूँ मैं. I'll just translate that. The narrow-minded cleric considered that I was a heretic, and on the other hand, a heretic considers I'm a Muslim. So this dichotomy and this sort of dilemma sort of also defined his life in many ways, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely humanized him, and of course, science, physics progresses very fast.
Right.
So when he and Weinberg and Glasgow wrote a theory that united two forces, now there is a theory that unites three forces. So it keeps moving, but I think the people, he should be in the textbooks. I think there's one guy who wrote textbooks in which he sort of ignored Abdus Salam,
Yeah. In Pakistan, they banned the textbooks and there are no chapters on him anymore, I believe.
Where, in Pakistan?
In Pakistan, yeah.
Yeah, this is a guy, European guy, one of his detractors. It's never mentioned, but I looked at his book on particle physics, and he gave a full page with photograph of the other guy, but Abdus Salam was in a kind of,
just a footnote.
So there's always that going on. There was another guy called, he was from Kerala, I think, and he almost did the same thing as Abdus Salam, or maybe a little step before.
Right.
But he was a graduate student. And his advisor told him, let's wait. While they were waiting, Feynman and the other guy, put the name to it, and he died a bitter man, He has a long name, I forget. I think it's Carolan.
Okay.
So, science has these things going on.
But it's again very tragic, considering that, you would assume that, people working together would have that kind of bonhomie, and they would have, some sense of, regard for this greater good, and that is what is most tragic about this whole story of Abdus Salam, that, he was in many ways undone by, the people, his countrymen, but also people, as I mentioned, from his own profession. Let me bring you to, to the craft part of the novel. I mean, that was, of course, the, the story part of it. But in terms of craft, you have this last chapter in which you bring in a first-person voice of a student who comes to visit his wife at her residence, and he is dead and gone, and now she's living with his memory. But also, I felt that chapter in many ways is important in living this message that how should we remember in this character of the novel, but also in some sense Abdus Salam. Was it important for you to tell the chapter in the first voice of a student who is researching his life?
Yeah, I needed that student. Initially, my first draft began with a student exploring the life. But then I found that it was a bit too much for the reader to bear. We are no longer in the magical realism phase. People want something straightforward.
Right.
And but I needed another voice to talk about him. How. And this is, I sometimes when you're writing a novel, you forget what's real and what's not. So I don't know, like, how this student discovered Abdus Salam, whether that was how I discovered or read about his desecration of his grave. I don't remember that, but that had to be brought in without another 10 chapters of his life. So I think it worked well. But that's why a novel takes time, because sometimes you need a flash that tells you, but this is how it should be. So I said, I'll put a coda and...
Right. Coda is the title of the chapter.
Finish it.
Yeah.
And also describe his wife, who is now an old woman, or at least elderly, when life goes on.
Yeah. And also the fact that, like most of your novels, as I said, there are resonances of history, there are resonances of who people are, what shapes them. I was just curious to understand, as a writer, drawing on your own heritage as a Smiley Muslim, who has gone back to your heritage. I mean, you have gone back to your heritage for your other books, including that memoir of yours. How does the process work for you when you set out to write a book? What decides what shape it is going to take? A fiction, a memoir, because sometimes it's difficult to categorize your books. Whether it's, of course, it's pure literary fiction, but it has also elements of, say, speculative fiction, or say a biographical sketch of sorts. And there are parallels somewhere, just as this particular novel with your own life, for instance, that a brown man in a white country doing great things. But perhaps you would not, or I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Didn't quite get that. You said many things.
Okay, so let me just be precise.
You're talking about what I drew from.
Yes.
I think the early novels was where I was basically reclaiming my story.
Yeah.
Because having left, and initially I thought I would go back to East Africa, but then things happen as usual, and then you somehow postpone it, and but I never left not to return.
Yeah.
I always thought I would. So my dedication to the place I came from was absolute, which is why I wrote in my essays that I felt I betrayed by not going back, which is why another reason why Abdus Salam attracted me, that he gave back not only to the country but to the part of the world that he came from, which we used to call the third world. And so for me that was a big attraction of Abdus Salam, that he actually cared about the rest of the world. Then of course there was this thing I told you, how can a person with that level of abstraction almost a prophet, then bow down and somehow didn't quite work for me. But I thought, how does it work for him? But at some point, you can't keep going back to your own past because there's nothing left. You have to deal with present, and I don't know. This novel, it just came like the next one I'm writing. And the form is always risky because I never thought. I thought some people, when they see physics, they say, "I won't understand it." It's like in North America, especially the United States, when they see your name without even trying, they say, "I can't pronounce it." That attitude, where you think it's physics, I don't understand it, but it's just one page. You can understand it because it's a man and a woman, and there's a love story, and there's a background, there's a father. But I still had to do it and then take the risk.
Yeah.
And so every novel has, for me, a bit of a risk, because the publishing world is not very kind nowadays, as it used to be maybe 10 years ago.
Even to you?
Even to me, to publish my essays, I had to lose more air. Somehow they always look at the bottom line without asking themselves, look, we are at the cultural forefront, we have a responsibility, not always to count, but they still keep doing that, And they're always looking for new prize winners.
Yeah.
So the fact that you won 2 prizes and 3rd prize and so that's the culture of publishing. You're looking for more prize winners, and there are more and more prizes, and so it's.
So as a writer, what is your motivation? I mean, you said that it's more like a disease, more like a compulsion. What is writing to you?
It keeps me alive. I see it seems like a cliche, easy to say. They have to talk to my wife, She explained to them why it's important. Anything I do, if I say it's for my writing, she won't object, I have to go away to be alone, and she'll say, fine, If I can't survive if I'm not writing. Even when I say this is my last book, and it's almost finished, and then the new idea comes, and I wonder, do I have enough life left to finish the new book?
No, you have been prolific. I think you have written, this is, I think, your 10th novel, collection of stories. You have written across genres, and I think part of this, the second part of this question was that what decides the genre? I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to, categorize your books. I mean, there's elements of different things that are sort of the fabric.
I think fiction is the main one. The essays came because I was invited to give lectures, and then I would develop them and edit them and correct them and so on. But the 2 memoirs, it was my journeys of self-discovery, like discovering India.
Yes.
I had to write about it. It took me 10 years, Some people in 1 year they finish it. I tried it didn't work. And then going back to the place I came from, because you see, when we were growing up, we always heard about these towns, in Tanzania and Kenya. Little towns that are part of your sort of baggage, or and then you are away, and then you tell yourself, but I might not see those places. That occurred to me, because when you're there, you say, one day I will go there, here and there and so on. But I realized that I might not see them. So then I met someone in Nairobi, and I said, will you come with me? He was working on my books. So then we made some trips by bus to the interior of Tanzania, and those were thrilling voyages, so that's how that African book came about,
Right. So would you say this novel is also, in some sense, a departure from your previous works, and including your last novel, The Delhi Obsession, which was more like a very sort of deliberate response to the times that we were living in. It came out in 2020, and love jihad was the raging issue then. And you bring in a Muslim and a Hindu together, and they fall in love. And in many ways that was, your response to the India of today. And I wanted to understand, as a writer, if you look at India of today, and what is it that, makes you hopeful, bothers you? What is your response like when you look at India of today?
Well, when we were young, although we didn't know India as, well, we knew it was there, it was part of us. We spoke the language, maybe 2 languages, 2 Indian languages. We ate the food. The faith, religious faith, was also from there. What else is there? Then there's just where you sort of living. Communities, we went as communities, so there was Indian communities, The structures, the buildings we built, some of the prayer houses, the contractors came from Gujarat. And at some point, there was this feeling that India was a spiritual home. But nowadays, and when I first came to India, it seemed like that too, 1993. That
you came more of first in 1993?
Yeah.
Okay.
That it was more a spiritual place. At least the people were more simple, less rushed. Although when I came, there was a big thing going on in Babri Masjid and Gujarat and Surat, and which was really shocking. But still, it was there was that simplicity. But now I think it seems maybe there was no spirituality at all. I was arguing with one of my friends yesterday. It was never spiritual, because when you see it now, there's so much consumerism.
Yeah.
I think more than where I live in Toronto. People there consume, but they don't consume with a passion. They consume because they need something.
Yeah.
And sometimes they may go after some fashion or whatever, but here there seems to be a mad consumerism in the middle classes.
Mm-hmm.
And that spiritual element. And if you look at the Bollywood movies now, and the Bollywood movies of then, Raj Kapoor and Dilip Kumar, and there was that idealism. There was that thing of working for the nation.
For the nation.
Now, it's just sex and drinking, alcohol.
Yeah.
And Bollywood promotes alcoholism,
Politically, if you, if you could describe India and its politics today, how would you frame it as?
Well, I don't want to get into controversy, but
Okay.
it's been saddening. I think there's more you can say that after so many years. And for me, coming from where I did, we had our communities.
Right.
There was, the Mochi community and the Hindus and the Vishnashri and the Bohras, and there was these communities, and there was this mild rivalry which would have been any communities there. They were the African tribes. But the passionate hatred was not there, you see. We didn't go take knives and start going after each other. Then to then see it at that level, it's just, it's like I see it as a scar within one's heart or soul, which was not there before. But once you discover India, then you see it's there. So what am I going to do? Supposed to do? Choose between one and the other, and for me it's the same.
Yeah.
As
if the two communities are being cleaved apart.
For us, it was the same.
Yeah.
You come here, they say, no, that's different, this is different. And we hate them, and those hate us. I said, but I don't hate either of you.
Right. Okay, since we are talking about science and religion here, and I wanted to understand that, of course, you came to fiction, and it was good for all of us fiction lovers, but it was also perhaps a loss to science, a loss to physics. Your relationship with physics today and with faith, with physics and faith, how do you look at
physics? I was very good in math and physics back home, that home.
Mm-hmm.
And but when you reach a place like the university I went to, MIT, it's a different level. And I wrote my papers, I finished my PhD and I wrote my papers and collaborated. But it's really not getting anywhere. Plus the job situation was terrible. So I left after 9-10 years of practicing as a physicist without a permanent job but a good scholarship, and having really achieved nothing except time to learn and maybe start a literary career and also help others in their literary career through a magazine that we founded. And then when I was talking to Parvez Udboy, who was just 1 year ahead of me, that was in 2020 when I went there, and he said the same thing. He said, if I was like Abdus Salam, I would not have left, but I knew I could do more here.
Yeah.
So it was not a big loss, except the academic environment I feel nostalgic about, you know.
Okay.
You know, the library is there, you know, the community is there, and the cultural activities. The mindset of a big university is different, you know, where people are always on the verge of discovering.
True.
As they told us, don't think you will overthrow Einstein, you know, because people have that vision that they will do something so fantastic. So that, of course, I miss. But so it's not literature. I always read when I was home, and I think it took guts too. I just had to write because I had memory filled with experiences. I had to
stories.
put them down. But of course, having memories and being able to construct something is different.
Yeah.
So many people tell me, look, I can also write. I have good memory. Okay.
That is not all about
It's
memory.
not
It's a lot that...
No. But you need, I think every writer uses memory. Even if they're writing science fiction, you know.
Right. Looking at the landscape of writing from, and I'm I'm looking at a bigger picture here, not just writing from India, but also in some sense global writing in English, that is, say Toronto, for instance, or even Kenya and Tanzania, for instance. Abdul Razak Gurnah, of course, got the Nobel for his writing again, which looks at migration and a whole host of issues that some of your own writing is deeply entrenched in. And I was just curious to know some of the writings that has these connections with these countries, with India, with Kenya, with Tanzania, with Canada. If you could sum up and tell us that, you know, what have you been reading? What are the writers you know who has fascinated you in these past few years?
Well, I don't. Now I read a lot of non-fiction, you know, historical stuff.
Right.
You know, travel logs by Arabs. You know, going all the way up to, you know, the almost Arctic Circle in the 9th century or something. I'm fascinated because I see that as hopefully some material for some book or novel.
Yeah.
But as a young person, I was of course fascinated by Dostoevsky, Conrad,
Joseph Conrad.
and then Graham Greene, although I find him dry, but I say he dealt with issues. And some of the, again, most young people, you know, use the European writers of the 70s and 80s, and some of the South American writers of those times. But nowadays, I read a new book only if I'm asked to be on a jury, which I do, because there's your own work to do. And I enjoy reading some of fascinating stuff of people traveling in medieval times. And one can't imagine, you know, they actually accomplished that, you know. You know, even Batuta and Al-Biruni, but you know, there were others even before them. And what world did they see? Did they see others as humans or not? And there's a lot of questions they ask, you know. So I'm fascinated by that. In terms of European, I think I discovered Tolstoy, although we did it in a course at MIT, but I think when I read War and Peace, I realized that unlike Dostoevsky, he satisfied me more, you know, as an older person, because he asks you, what is the meaning of your life? So.
Okay. If you were to, and it's a hypothetical question, if you were to have a conversation with Abdus Salam today, what is it that what was it? What would it look like? What is it that you would like to ask him?
To be honest, he would be speaking Urdu, and I understand Hindi, but his Urdu would be.
But suppose you have a common ground and you can talk
Right.
in English.
I don't know, because he is a senior physicist.
Yeah.
I would of course be deferential, so there would be no real conversation. Yeah, not for me, and.
But regarding his, the whole.
I might ask
Yeah.
to talk to him about what his belief that mathematics and physics especially should be shared universally.
Great.
That you don't tell the people in Tanzania or Kenya or Nigeria, you wait till you get developed, then you can do this. That's nonsense, At least for me. And I think he also believed that it's a human heritage. And you don't have to be only in the first world or in India or Pakistan or to love mathematics and physics, So that, of course, one can talk about. And also, I guess one could talk about the difference in approach, the curiosity then, like in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, and now in the country that he happened, as I said, to land in. He didn't choose, it just chose him. And then there would ask some questions which we would not have public answers.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure
Thank
talking
you.
to you. Thank you.
The Federal and Vale Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and Saint Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.